So now we're seeing conservative protesters coming up and doing something, we mentioned this earlier in the show, that's, as far as I can tell, rather unprecedented, at least in this culture war that we've seen over the past several years. First of all, when I started covering, actually, let me make sure I give you guys the context before I get into this. The Independent reports, protesters attack police with pepper spray as they try to storm Oregon Capitol. Stories from a couple days ago. 2 people arrested on charges of trespassing and assaulting an officer. It was bear spray. And these were conservatives using bear spray against police while entering the building. So they say about 300 members of the Proud Boys, Patriot Prayer, and other groups arrived at the Reopen Oregon rally, calling on Governor Kate Brown to lift pandemic restrictions as lawmakers met in a special session to discuss stimulus and vaccination distribution measures. I've been covering this stuff since 2011. I've been on the ground at protests since I was a teenager, going down in Chicago to these, anti-Iraq war stuff, anti-Afghan war protests, and just really complaining all the time. And when I started covering Occupy Wall Street, I never saw a conservative protest. You'd see like Tea Party stuff. And that was, I went to DC once and I saw a bunch of lawn chairs and it was a bunch of conservatives and Republicans waving little American flags. And I was like, that's a protest. Yeah. Well, it was effective for them for sure. They played it smart. They played it better. And meanwhile, Occupy was very physical, nonviolent civil disobedience mixed with what they call the diversity of tactics, which really sullied and soured the whole thing. But over the next several years, we started seeing, Proud Boys come out. I remember going to Berkeley and seeing Proud Boys, and it was like, I was like, oh, Proud Boys are out here. Like, they're just like, drinking with Gavin and doing their videos. And now they were on the ground. Now they were actually fighting with Antifa. And I remember I was in front of Trump Tower. And there was a Trump supporter who's just regular guy, regular clothes. And they were protesters. And I was talking to him and he said he was a Trump supporter. And I said, why aren't you protesting? Why aren't you coming out and supporting your president? And this is years ago. And he was like, oh, no. I can't do anything like that. Mm-hmm. So I remember the first time I saw it, I think it was in Boston when I saw a march of Trump supporters chanting, whose streets, our streets. And I laughed and I'm like, that's what the left says. Now you got conservatives organizing, marching in protests. I'll tell you what I haven't seen. I have seen Antifa throw bricks at cops, throw Molotovs at cops. I've not seen them pepper spray cops. Certainly, I think the Molotovs are way worse. But it is fascinating to me. And I'm not saying that in a good way. I'm like, this is crazy to see conservatives bear spraying cops because you got to really push the line to make a conservative come after a cop. I mean, these are people at this protest. There were a couple of people waving thin blue line flags, clearly in support of police. Now someone there sprays the cops down with bear mace because these cops were barring them from a hearing they were legally allowed to enter. So windows got smashed, cops shoved people back, a couple people got arrested. I'll tell you, we do hear in the media a lot fears about what the right will do if they finally feel like oppressed and they're going to push back. And I'm like, it's a good point. The problem is they bring it up when no conservative is doing anything. Like Antifa comes out, burns down a whole city, and they're like, but they're the good guys. They're fighting, fascism. And conservatives are walking around with little American flags. Now you have the very serious question of if conservatives have finally said these officers who are violating the Constitution and keeping us locked down and barring us from a public hearing, if they're no longer on our side, why would we be on their side? And then a clash erupts.
But also it's that it's conservatives over the last year have suffered. Just America has suffered, but also conservatives are banned. Conservatives are canceled. For the last 4 years, they made conservatives out to be conspiracy theorists. They called us names, deplorables, chumps, you name it. I mean, every conservatives are constantly. I mean, look at what Antifa did to elderly conservatives who walked out of the Republican National Convention and back to their hotels on the last night in Washington, D.C. This country has been under attack by the radical left for the better part of a year, and conservatives have sat back and done nothing but take it on the chin every single month. And so I'm not saying, I don't like violence. Violence is unacceptable on either side. But we are in the middle of, I think, one of the greatest constitutional crises that we've ever experienced in this country. Conservatives already feel like they don't have a voice. This is what's happening when free speech and the First Amendment is essentially canceled or free speech is suppressed. Bad things happen. And part of and I think that's part of what we're seeing here today. Those conservatives in Oregon, got in the fight with the cops out there. They were unconstitutionally denied their right to a public hearing. Again,
and they're not violent.
They're not violent.
They certainly some of them got violent, but it's very different from if a bunch of like Antifa people show up wearing all black. They typically act a fool and they start threats, and you say, take off your mask and hoodie and glasses and you can come in the building. I'm fine with that. If someone wants to protest and come out and yell rabble rabble and they want to wear sunglasses, a mask, and a hoodie, that's fine too. You want to commit a violent act, that's not okay. But what's crazy now is Antifa fights cops. They fight cops. We got that video. I was out of like Seattle, I think. They threw a Molotov at cops. That's crazy. I mean, they're not just talking about trying to kill the guy. They're talking. When you throw a Molotov at somebody, you're not just trying to commit murder. You want to make sure they suffer the whole way through, and if they survive, they have permanent injuries for the rest of their lives. That's psychotic. Now conservatives who typically and spent the whole year defending the police, they're mad at them. The police need the support of anybody they can get, especially when, against the wishes of many of the members of the public, they're defunding police. Minnesota, this is hilarious. City council votes to abolish their police department. All of a sudden, crime rates start skyrocketing. Locals start calling their city council members saying, what's happening? Why aren't the police responding to calls anymore? They come into an emergency meeting. Okay, we got to go backwards. We want to do over. It was a mistake. It was a mistake. They're doing it even though people are saying not to. And conservatives the whole time have been saying, back the blue, defend the police, not defund the police. But what happens when the police don't get that support because the police are the ones now who are shutting down businesses? During the riots in June, Antifa were destroying small businesses and burning down buildings. Well, now the videos I see in big cities, they're Democrat cities, yeah. Mind you, it's the police doing it. It's the NYPD who stood in front of that bar in Staten Island and basically looked the guy in the face and said, you have no constitutional rights because we say so, and we'll arrest you if you try and let people into your building. The First Amendment says peaceably assemble. It doesn't say why. If I want to peaceably assemble to, play marbles or whatever, I'm allowed to do it. If someone says I'm going to open up my business, I have a right. I have a right to open it to the public. He has a constitutional right to publicly assemble. The police barred the building. Who are those cops to violate the Constitution that way? Well,
I mean, this is part of the reason why I say that the police should not follow unconstitutional orders. They certainly in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we've not experienced. I mean, I've not seen or had experiences like that. In fact, most of the cops that I've come into contact with, they loathe the orders. In fact, we've had some sheriffs come out and say simply, we're not gonna enforce them. Good. The government does not have a right to deny your ability to make a living. The government does not have a right to tell you what you have to wear in your own house. The government doesn't have a right to tell you how many people you can have in your own house.
Yep.
So if you're a police officer and you get a call and maybe a neighbor tells on you, you get a call and you show up to someone's house and they got a couple people in their house, you shouldn't be enforcing unconstitutional orders. And
exactly, they're orders. They're not laws. There's no statutory backing to this. It was some governor or mayor just saying, do it. And there are cops who are doing it.
And also, can we also just have a conversation about in Pennsylvania, we're locked down again. Governor Wolf locked us down. He shut down restaurants and indoor dining. First of all, there's absolutely no science behind this, right? And you shutting down restaurants. You know what happens when you shut down restaurants? If anything, we should be opening up more restaurants to allow people to spread out more. But when people can't go out to a restaurant, you know what they do? They entertain at home.
They go to their friends' houses.
So if you're looking to stop the spread of COVID-19, and you actually look at some of the contact tracing research, it says 76% of the spread happens in people's own home. What you're doing by closing restaurants is shunting people back into their own homes, which, according to your own research, allows for the spread of COVID-19.
Didn't the Supreme Court already rule that the first lockdown in Pennsylvania was
the federal court, and then another judge took it up and struck it down. We've got so many experiences with the court systems, but.
Let me show you this. From Vox.com, December 10th. Southern California sheriffs are refusing to enforce stay-at-home orders. It's these big blue cities. So this is another reason why I'll always say the ACAB people are wrong. Somebody commented. I made a music video in November, and it's called Will the People. You can check it out. But it's about the cycle of authoritarianism and violence. And someone commented, it was really funny. They said, you made an entire video showing how the bad guys are the police and like the people are rising up against them to remove the dictators and so they're always backed by the cops. And I'm like, when you have blue areas, when you have Democrats and the police there don't care about the Constitution, yes, you have a problem. When you have these places in Southern California where the sheriffs uphold the Constitution, when you have places in smaller towns and and local cops who uphold the Constitution, the cops are the good guys, the ones protecting you from the despots, from the authoritarians.
The greatest hedge against authoritarianism is our Constitution. Our Constitution protects all Americans, is a shield for all Americans against authoritarian government overreach.
Listen, this is why my understanding is most cops swear an oath to uphold the Constitution.
Absolutely, and they take it seriously.
And when they do, they are literally the good guys. When they don't, they're literally the bad guys.
Yeah, police is a verb. Like if I give you a gun, I'm like, go walk around and make sure no one's out there. You're policing the area. Whether or not you are adhere to the Constitution has nothing to do with it. Some of those guys did take oaths, and if they're violating them, that's a problem. But anyone can police.
Well, it really does come down to cops as the most important group of people. And I'm not saying important as a good or a bad thing. The most consequential group of people in this country right now are cops who are upholding their Constitution or breaking it. In New York, we're seeing them break it. And that means people's lives are being destroyed. In areas like Southern California, we're seeing them uphold it, and they're the heroes stopping the fascists. Well, I have no problem calling them, use their own word against them. These Democrats that feel they have a right to give our taxpayer dollars to massive corporations, to shut everything down by edict, they're fascists.
Well, and when you see some of the reporters talking to Governor Wolf, it really is. It would be hysterical if it weren't tragic for these restaurants who are closing in record numbers in the state of Pennsylvania. Reporters asking him, well, why are you closing restaurants? What research are you using? Do you know what he's saying? He's like, I can't think of a more dangerous thing than people sitting with but there's no research to support that the spread of COVID-19 is happening in restaurants, especially when restaurants have invested tens of thousands of dollars in taking 50% capacity. People are spread out. They've got
outdoors.
plexiglass or they're outdoors. All you're effectively doing is taking someone's ability to make a living 3 weeks before Christmas. And it's not just the owners of the restaurants, it's the busboys, it's the cooks, it's the servers. All of these people are going to have not only trouble putting food on the table for their family, but they're going to have issues Christmas for their children, for God's sake. It's really frustrating to me. So, I mean, I've stood up in Pennsylvania, and I feel like I'm the only one in Pennsylvania saying restaurants stay open, cops disobey unconstitutional orders. And it's working, except for now we've got government and health, the health department showing up to restaurants and cited one restaurant in Western Pennsylvania, Giovanni's. It's an Italian restaurant. Health department came in there and said, well, you're not supposed to be open for in-person dining. And he said, well, I can't make a living if I don't. So they came back the next day. They pulled his health permit and they said, oh, we'll make you a deal. We'll let you do takeout. And he said, I lose money when I do takeout. I'm staying open. He said, well, guess what? We got to shut you down now.
How are they going to do it?
Well, he didn't listen.
So are they going to send cops in?
Look, if they do, I don't know. I hope that the cops don't. I hope that they don't comply. I don't think that they will. But the point is, people are starting to push back. And what I said earlier in the program is a government derives power from the consent of the people. The moment we no longer consent, the government has no power to impose any unconstitutional lockdowns. And again, I'll say this again because there'll be some radical left group that's going to take this out of context and say that I don't care about COVID. I do care about COVID a lot. I think we need to adopt a more surgical pandemic response. Yep. I think that we can protect small businesses and protect people's ability to make a living while simultaneously protecting public health. I think we can do both.
Not only that, I think at this point, I don't care what the response being offered up is as long as it's not lockdown. You know why? We did the lockdown. Didn't work.
The science behind them is dubious at this point. Anybody that's advocating for lockdowns at this point in the game is not looking at the data and not looking at the science.
But I'll clarify. The first point of the lockdowns was not to stop everyone from getting COVID. It was to make it so the hospitals could handle the load by spreading it out. That was the goal of the lockdown. We did. Now it's back. We slowed the spread. It came back with a vengeance. We can't just do it again because clearly it's just going to keep coming back. We have to do something else. So my question is, though, with these protesters, at what point do conservatives, I don't know, escalate, as it were? There's a town called Mossy Brook in Washington where the mayor just said we're exempt from the lockdown just by his own decree, and so the city is just normal. Patriot Prayer, right-wing groups showed up and they partied. I think, people, what the government is doing is risking the loss of their legitimacy. When you have police in New York and other big cities violating the Constitution, well, then people feel like the government is illegitimate. When you have police officers who defy the elected government, like in Southern California, to defend the Constitution, then people are going to start feeling like their elected government is illegitimate. If the Constitution is not being protected, or the governors are trying to rip it apart, then people are going to lose confidence. At what point do we start seeing small towns and right-wing groups just set up their own checkpoints or whatever and say, you have no power here, to like the cops? Or
when they go hungry, when they start going hungry, they'll go
God,
crazy.
I hope that never happens. I think we can avoid all of that by simply disobeying the orders, period.
The most effective way. Because this is the most
and
important thing.
by the way, Tim, like when I say disobey the orders, I'm simply saying restaurants stay open, small businesses stay open. If you want to leave your house and you want to go shopping, then go shopping. Follow CDC guidelines. Wear a mask in the store. If you're somebody that's afraid of COVID, right? Or if you're somebody that has a pre-existing condition, or if you're in a high-risk category, stay home. Order groceries online. Look to your neighbor for help. Maybe they'll go grocery shopping for you. But there are ways that human beings we'll find a way to be safe and be responsible during all this. But what the point that I'm making is I don't think a top-down draconian government lockdown is the answer, because there's that old phrase from Ronald Reagan, like, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. That scares me.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. We do the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. So come back to check us out when we go live. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and we are also available on all podcast platforms for free if you want to listen to us there. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all next time.